It's usually like in a war film, especially for one back then, it'd be very one-sided, a one-sided critique, like, Nazis good, America. No, sorry, Nazis bad. Nazis bad, Americans good.
Maybe if it was
Not
made
the other way
now,
around.
but you never know.
These
Yeah,
days,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Not
yeah.
You're
good.
wonderful to see. You ought to be in pictures. Oh, what a hit you would be.
Yeah, it's been great. Gabriel moved back from Manchester. He was there for 5 years. And so, although he'll probably be moving out soon, he landed here for a little. In these last few months, it's been good because some nights it's been great to just watch a movie with him. We just did our review of Better Man, and Gabriel and I had watched it together. And it was great watching the Robbie Williams biopic with the guy who just spent the last 5 years in Manchester.
Yeah, and it's made me realize that most biopics would be improved if the lead character was a monkey. I watched The Doors the next day, and I was like, I like Val Kilmer. Would have been better as a monkey.
So, why don't you tell us a little bit about why you picked this movie? What's your personal experience seeing it? I mean, was this just a random title out of the hat, or how did you come to your decision to choose Bridge on the River Kwai?
It was. I remember watching this one like really young with you, pops. Just like one of those ones that's kind of just like in your memory vaguely. Like I remember you saying like, "Oh, that's Obi-Wan," like pointing at Alec Guinness. And it's like, "Oh, I know Obi-Wan." This movie, but these not. There's no lightsabers here. But yeah, I remember like the shots and like the ending scene, and like I wanted to rewatch it. And out of the best winners of the '50s, it seemed like the one that I was most interested in, and it would be more fun to go back and rewatch.
Quick anecdote, how much this film is part of the zeitgeist just of the world. I was passing a teacher today in the hallway at school where I work, and he was whistling, and I stopped him, and I was like, "Are you whistling Bridge over the River Kwai?" And he goes, "Yeah, yeah, I was." I said, I do movie reviews. I'm actually reviewing that movie tonight. It just blew my mind that you were
That's
walking
pretty
by
cool.
me and yeah, and whistling that. So has nothing to do with the movie per se, but I just thought I had to mention that just by the serendipity of the moment.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no, that's
I was just thinking about that the other day as well, just how much that whistle tune. Did I remember from Bridge on the River Kwai, like watching it really young, or was it Breakfast Club? Because it was also in that where they're all singing it in the library.
yeah.
It
It's I
did
think
everything
it's
for me.
actually an older piece of music, isn't it? I think it's from
Mhm.
like 1914, something like that, and then they just sort of adopted it into the film, and then it's become sort of iconic. All right, so where do we want to start talking about this film? It was based on a novel by French author Pierre Boulle.
Yeah.
Quick trivia: which other book did he famously write
Oh,
that was turned into a movie?
I
I know,
just
Gabriel, do you know?
no, it's I saw this yesterday, but I can't remember right now.
Planet of the Apes.
Planet of the Apes.
Yeah, that's the one.
That's right. So he wrote it in French. Apparently, it is almost completely made up, although the Burma Railway did happen, and the Japanese army did get prisoners of war to build it. And apparently, conditions were even more horrific than they are in the movie. Just to set the tone, this is a World War II movie, and it's set in sort of Burma, Thailand, Siam, as it was at the time, although they shot it in Ceylon, which was later become Sri Lanka. And it's about a British troop who are brought in off the railway to a camp because they have to literally fast track construction of a bridge in order to meet a certain deadline because a train is coming through, and that is going to help just connect up the Japanese war machine in that part of the world. And the officer in charge of the new British platoon of soldiers who are already prisoners of war that brought in is he Captain Colonel Nicholson, played
Yes.
by
Colonel Nicholson.
Alec Guinness, who is very much from the old school, very much from the Calvin Wynne Candy school
Yes.
of British military, where there is a right way of doing things, there is a wrong way of doing things, there is a British way of doing things, and is determined to uphold all of the tenets of. Would it have been the Geneva Convention by then? Was that at the
Geneva
end of the First
Convention,
World
yeah,
War?
yeah, because he's got the little booklet at the beginning where it's like he's reading the Geneva Convention.
That's right, and he keeps waving it in the face of the Japanese officer in charge. And the main rule there, the main agreement is that officers are not allowed to do, or they are exempt from physical labor if they are prisoners of war. And the Japanese willfully ignore this, and instead of going along with it for his own safety, Nicholson stands up to this, and that becomes one of the major sort of conflicts, certainly in the first half of the film.
You're right. You're right. He definitely has a Colonel Blimp approach to how he's good. You know, certainly not. You know, we are British. We have a certain standard we have to maintain. But sir, there's no civilization here. Well, we have to bring civilization. Then there's just these little back and forth dialogues that are reminiscent of that movie we did with The Life and Death of Colonel Blimp.
Yeah, I mean, it's this wonderfully ridiculous concept that there are rules of engagement in war, and that there is a way to conduct oneself even on the battlefield, and there are some things that are just not cricket. And
it makes you wonder: does anybody obey these? Like, does anybody? Do they? To what degree are they broken?
But it certainly seems that World War II is regularly cited as the war that ended that line of thinking. That the Nazi war machine and the Japanese Imperial Army approached warfare in a different way, and much like, shall we say, Trump's come into power. They're like, there are all of these guidelines and all of these suggestions about how one should do things, but if they're not completely legally binding, then to hell with them, and I'm going to just do it however I want. And that seems to have been the case here, and is one of the major sort of conflicts of the movie and of the story. It's just the fact that this was an enemy and an adversary unlike any they had encountered before, really.
Gabriel, what kind of insights, like watching the film, was there anything that stood out to you watching it now as a older man as opposed to a young boy?
Yeah, kind of piggybacking off what you were saying, James. It's kind of, I see it almost as a critique of like the Japanese during World War II as much as it is like the British. Like the British, it's usually like in a war film, especially for one back then, it'd be very one-sided critique, like, Nazis good, Nazis bad. Nazis bad, Americans good.
Maybe if it was made now, but you never know.
These days, yeah.
The sequel's coming.
But yeah, like apparently Alec Guinness originally didn't want to do the film because it had such like a critique of the Britishness of officers in World War II, and just the kind of like that older school mentality.
So Steve, how about you? Do you remember when you first saw the film or anything like that?
Yeah, like a lot of times I've said, James, movies like this is something I would have watched with my dad. This is a dad film for sure. And so Gabriel's getting second generation dad film here, because I watched it with my dad, and there was something, I don't know what it is about World War II. I think I saw a stand-up comedian that was saying, as you get older, he was saying, as a white man living in America, once I get older, I feel I need to start becoming Republican, and I have to start loving World War II history. It's like something embedded in the DNA as older white guys. I'm flipping through Netflix, and I see the new biography and the new the film reels they have of Winston Churchill. I'm thinking, oh, I got to watch that. That looks interesting. Yeah. So I think there's something compelling about World War II, and this film really captures a real, because there is no Nazis. We don't get a lot of movies about the Japanese. I mean, there's Tora, and there's Midway. I guess there are a few, but
there are.
I think we almost singularly identify World War II sometime as fighting the Nazis and fighting Germany. And this film is sans Nazis. This has a completely different World War II enemy.
Definitely, it's a completely different sort of landscape of the conflict, which I think is one of the things that actually makes it interesting. This is, it's an entirely different setting than we would be sort of used to seeing, or that, like you say, the majority of sort of World War II movies from that time. For me, I think it was also, something that I probably watched for the first time on Sunday afternoon on TV, just at home as a young boy. It's one that I kept coming back to because I think it does have so many different elements to it. It does have that kind of exoticism to it that's a typical sort of European set World War II movie doesn't have. But it's a number of different types of war movie. It's a prisoner of war movie, but it's also the kind of sort of boys' own men on a mission kind of thing, because you've got the William Holden character, who's like the sort of the token American, which was a kind of a conceit that the film added to the story. That character exists, but he was a British officer. They were like, no, we need to make him American. We need to get a big star in. Apparently, William Holden had the biggest payday in Hollywood history to do the movie, and he sort of almost hijacks the film. And because he escapes and he goes back to base and he says, okay, this is what's going on, and then he mounts the mission to go back. Or it's almost like Ripley in Aliens. He is coerced into sort of going back into the hornet's nest, as it were, to mount the.
He's like the cool fun American coming and go like, oh, these Brits are behaving in a wacky manner. I want to go be cool and escape and run through the forest and then roll around on a beach with the hot blonde.
Well, absolutely. Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that scene, because apparently that scene was a studio stipulation and had to be sort of added later because Columbia were going to pull the plug at one point because there weren't any white women in it. And so they had to write that scene where William Holden, rolls around in the sand with a nurse.
The original DEI.
That's right.
Exactly.
DEI. We've got to include the white women. There's no white women in this.
There's no white women in this.
Only in the 50s. Only in the 50s.
Not enough white people in this movie.
Yeah. Not enough Americans, not enough white people. Can't have just Alec Guinness. Quick anecdote. I don't know if you've been to Chiang Mai, James, but I've been north of Chiang Mai. I spent a couple nights in the jungle at a place we take students up there for a global perspectives trip. And although most of their trip is in a very, very nice hostel, we do this one night in the very secluded jungle area. And I tell you, there's some big critters. That jungle is fierce. It's big. I'm not even saying I was in the deep jungle. This is where we could still take students.
I can tell you were not. But
no, but I will tell you, there's some critters that I saw on the wall and they were hiding behind things. All I know is when I watch this movie, I'm thinking there's some big spiders underneath those,
Well, I can one up.
See a jungle movie. That's what I think.
I can one up you on that one, Steve. Is that I have been to the bridge on the River Kwai, or at least the one that's there now, and it's actually the one that if you go to the Wikipedia page of the bridge on the River Kwai, I've been to that bridge. Obviously, it's not the one in the movie because, as we've already covered, the one in the movie gets blown up. The one in the novel does not get blown up, and it wasn't really a true story anyway. They just kind of made this into the mission for the story. But there is a bridge on the River Kwai, and it was built by the POWs under the I was going to say leadership, but that's not quite how it was, of the Japanese army. And you can go. It was a day trip from Bangkok. It's not that far, actually.
Okay.
It's there's a little museum there and what have you, but it's more of a token gesture just for tourists. It certainly isn't as remote or as spectacular as the bridge here. But I love sort of the mental, how to put it, the motivational sort of conundrum that surfaces in the second half, where Nicholson slowly goes kind of mad to the point where he is working with the Japanese. He's like, okay, well, look, if we're going to do this, while all the other people are sort of saying, okay, well, we need to do the worst job possible. We need to delay it as much as possible. We need to make sure that it doesn't function as a bridge, that it collapses immediately or preferably as soon as the train goes over it and all these kind of things. He's like, not on my watch, damn it. If the British army are going to build a bridge, we're going to show them how to do it properly. We're going to do it as quickly and as efficiently and as capably as possible and show up these Japanese officers. And
noticed, Gabriel, how a Brit was able to pull that off so well. Like, I almost wanted to go build a bridge just for James when he said that.
Yeah, it's like watching the film. It's like, is this just Stockholm syndrome, or is this just being British? Is that?
it's being incredibly British, but it's such a bizarre motivation that upsets other characters in the movie. It upset real POWs. It upset the soldiers who were actually there at the time, because they're like absolutely the version of Nicholson that is a real person absolutely did not do that, and absolutely sort of made his men sabotage the project as much as they possibly could. They mixed the concrete poorly. Apparently, they went and found termites wherever they could and sort of stuffed them into the wood so that it would just be rubbish as much as possible, and it would never have gone that way. So I like his descent into madness, and
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
his inherent stubborn bullheaded Britishness, gets the better of him. And
Yeah.
he's like, if there is going to be a plaque, if this bridge is going to stand the test of time and is going to have a plaque on it saying that it was built by the British Army, then by God, it better be a good one. And it kind of works because it really gets under the skin of the Japanese general. He loses,
Yeah.
and him and the other Japanese officer who is kind of the architect behind it, or the chief
Yeah.
engineer. It really takes them down. They lose so much face over it. Yeah, Lieutenant Miura.
He kind of takes control. Like he takes the power away from the Japanese by taking over the plants. Like when they're sitting down and they're having the meeting, and he starts calling the shots. It's like, actually, it'll be more effective. Like, should we just have lunch served here? And like he's kind of calling the shots. And Sato's having to sit down and kind of shut up if
Right.
he wants this bridge done right. Otherwise, you have to commit seppuku.
So it's like he's more motivated by these sort of petty logistical victories, sort of over the blueprints and over the design and the construction. It's like, well, no. British workmanship will win out here. We know the best way of doing it. We will save you time. And he's more motivated by winning that way, rather than seeing the big picture and going, well, we don't want to actually build them a bridge that facilitates their railway line. But so
Coming back to the commander, Sato, I love that line when he's with William Holden before William Holden makes his escape. And the commander's getting nervous because, like Gabriel said, he's going to have to kill himself if he doesn't finish this bridge by a certain day. And he says to William Holden, what would you do if you were in my position? William Holden goes, well, I guess I just have to die.
he's like, yeah, you're not getting any sympathy from me.
Yeah, just, go ahead. If you need to kill yourself here, don't let me stop you.
Yeah, I mean, especially, on top of everything else, when Nicholson and the others first arrive at the camp, William Holden's character Shears is really, there's like two of them left, right? They're like the only survivors. Their entire battalion has died, either in the hospital, in the camp, or working on the railroad. Or have escaped or died trying. They are literally the only ones there, and they're only surviving because he keeps getting put on sort of the sick list, so he doesn't have to go out and work. I love the detail that it turns out that he's not even who he says he is. That he's not Commander Shears of the U.S. Navy. That he's just an ordinary GI who trades clothes with a dead commanding officer for the very same motivations as that Nicholson is trying to uphold. He's like, well, I'll get an easier time if I get caught as an officer. I should be safer and fare better than if I'm just an enlisted man. Then I won't make it back. So it wasn't a simple sort of token gesture to throw in this extra character. I really like the sort of the layers that they add to him,
and it really shows that scrappy American. He'll do whatever it takes to. Well, coming back to the Nicholson and the Stockholm syndrome, as Gabriel mentioned, it's almost like it took Shears dying at the end for the veil to lift up, and it makes me think. I've tried not to linking a lot of things to current politics, but we tell ourselves certain narratives in our head. Obviously, there's politics going on in the world right now. I've got friends, I got family that tell themselves a certain narrative that I'm doing what's right, and to an outsider, it looks ridiculous. Like Nicholson's men are going, do we, like you said, do we have to build it quite so good? Can we do, there is a double, what do they call it? A double loop learning, double loop critique that's happening. There is input being put into Nicholson, but because of the narratives he's telling in his head, he can't hear it. And then suddenly when he sees Shears die, suddenly all those critiques come rolling in at once. And he's, this is madness. And quietly hoping that there'll be something. Hopefully, I thought January 6th would do it, but apparently not. But something will just cause the lights to come on, and some of these critiques will finally hit home. The veil will lift, and you'll see, oh my gosh, this is not who we're supposed to be. And I did love that moment with Nicholson because I keep saying Nicholson as if it's Jack Nicholson with Sir Alec with Alec
Jack.
Guinness,
Alec Guinness, yeah.
Jack, yeah, with Alec Guinness, where the lights come on and he has that come to Jesus moment.
Albeit way too late when it's all too far gone. And
But he does, finally blow up the bridge though.
but does he?
Yeah,
Do you
so
think
it's
he
not bad.
is he motivated to blow up the bridge, or does he just because he just falls on it? Doesn't
I
he?
think he, I know,
I think he's motivated. Yeah.
yeah.
I think he positions himself. He throws himself on the detonator, realizing like what he's done. Like shouts out like, "What have I done?" Sees all the death and carnage around him, and throws himself on
Hmm.
the.
But I love it. It's a
You- you-
spectacularly tragic ending.
You're not convinced, James. You're not convinced by that. That's
No, I mean he does kind of come to his senses for sure, albeit at the very end. But even 2 minutes before the end, he's like, he's gonna blow the whole thing. He
right.
finds the wires and everything. I love when they wake up on the morning of it and the water level has gone down and suddenly all the wires are exposed and they're gonna go. I love that kind of sort of men on a mission kind of movie, like Where Eagles Dare and things like that.
Yeah.
They're yeah, they're some of the most sort of exciting World War II movies, and I think that's what I admire about this movie so much is that it manages to be that as well as a prisoner of war movie and as well as this great sort of look into the sort of psychology of warfare and leadership and what it really means to sort of represent your country. This standoff that Nicholson is having with Sato is like is fueled by so much principle, but then to what but it really tests to what degree they believe their nation's rhetoric, kind of thing. And so yeah, I like all of that stuff.
I recently watched Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence,
Oh
which
yes,
obviously is another Japanese war film, particularly with a very strong British character and a very strong American character, kind of battling in wits with the Japanese in a POW camp. A bit more. What would be the word you'd call it, Gabriel or James? Well, how would you describe Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence? I wouldn't say it's more. It's not
It's
surreal.
Thank you for bringing that up
It's
because like before rewatching the bridge over the River Kwai, in my head I'd get those two mixed up because both Japanese POW movies, like similar vibes. But Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence came out in the '80s.
that's right.
yeah.
Yeah,
And has a Japanese director as well.
Japanese
That's far more like a Japanese movie, albeit a number of English speaking characters in it. And I think that sort of helps. But yeah, that's got a far more, I think, surreal, dreamlike, sort of almost poetic kind of
Yeah.
sensibility to it.
even with the score, like the Ryuichi Sakamoto like piano
Oh yeah.
score.
Yeah.
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 For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I had only rewatched that quite recently as well, and so I was getting a lot of echoes of that when rewatching Bridge on the River Kwai, or vice versa as well. They make a really interesting sort of a pair of films for sure.
Watching this film like brought up a phrase that I've been hearing a lot recently, and the concept of a boring film, where it's a slow burner, and it's like it could be what some consider a boring film. Like I've seen The Brutalist described as this, where it's like it's just a slow burner, but something that you just enjoy watching throughout the process of it, and you don't mind that it's slower paced than your average film. So yeah, watching this, I was like, oh, this is a boring film in the good way.
I'm being horribly triggered right now.
It's just something I thought while watching it. I was like, oh, like this in a good way. This like a nice slow burner, slower pace, but still just thoroughly enjoyable, and you just enjoy being in the world of it.
Those are definitely true. It is definitely a slow burn film, certainly by 2025 standards.
Yeah.
As is The Brutalist you bring up, randomly. Yes, I must admit that I think we were talking about how we, as we mature You're talking about your who was it you were citing earlier that you liked World War II movies more as you got older. I certainly find that
Oh,
I
yeah.
used to as a kid growing up, I used to sort of hate westerns and hate war movies as a blanket statement. They were the boring kinds of movies, and so I would never watch them. And obviously, as I get older, I would watch a lot more and more and more of those. And I find that also increasingly I'm being increasingly drawn to what you're referring to as quote unquote boring movies, just the long, slow, immersive, character based films. Things like like the Brutalist is a very good example of a new movie evoking that old style.
Yeah.
I think a film like Giant, if you've seen George Stevens's
Yeah,
Giant
with that's the
with
one with
James
James Dean,
Dean.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's one of the James Dean movies, and There Will Be
I
Blood
haven't
is a
seen
more
it. I
recent
haven't seen
example
it.
of that kind of movie, I think, as well.
Yeah.
You could even argue something like Oppenheimer is, although it's got Nolan at the helm, so he has a very modern aesthetic. But I know what you mean. I object to the word boring, but I know exactly what you mean. This
I'm
idea
just
of
saying
sort
what
of
I've heard.
a slow burn
Yeah.
cinema, and increasingly I just find that that's totally my kind of movie now. I just on a Sunday afternoon or something, to slap
Oh,
something like that
definitely.
on. It's like, okay, I've got 3 hours to kill. I'm just gonna go
I
go
keep
do that.
Gabriel hasn't watched Lawrence of Arabia yet, and I keep saying let's watch Lawrence of Arabia, and he's always
Yes.
like, I don't have 3 hours to just absorb it.
Oh, it's longer
I
than
know
He
one
wants
that.
that.
this.
Yeah. Like
Is it
I've
longer
always
than
wanted to
three?
like. I know a airplane's probably not the best way to watch Lawrence of Arabia, but like it
Hmm.
was always on the in-flight entertainment. And I was like, okay, this flight, I'm gonna watch Lawrence of Arabia because it was just always on there. And it's like that's gonna eat up about 4 hours of my time. I finally go to watch it and they've taken it off. So
Oh no, but
I'll have
yeah,
to get
no,
around to
that's
that someday.
I totally get that. I get that. I mean, I think you have to. I will remind people more and more these days when they're like, "Oh, it's how long? It's over 3 hours." It's like, yeah, but you'll happily sit there and binge watch 5 episodes of
That's it.
whatever show, and it's like, sure, yeah, you can pause it and go to the toilet and that kind of make a cup of tea and what have you, but it's entirely possible to do it, and it's entirely digestible. I mean, as we talk, in what later this week on Thursday, I'm going to a screening of The Brutalist. I've seen that movie twice already, and I cannot wait to see it again because I've only seen it on a screener so far. And I've got a nice setup at home, but it's not the same. And I really
Yeah.
want to see it on a nice big screen. But yeah, I mean, if you're going to do Lawrence of Arabia, I mean, it's coming up in our series, so Steve, you'll definitely be prepping for it in a few episodes' time, won't you? So, Gabe,
I would
just
love to
make
see that on the big screen. I've never seen Lawrence of
Yeah.
Arabia on the big screen.
I don't think I have either.
No,
But
and that's kind of like Ben-Hur. You really need to see it in all of its grandeur.
well, we're getting right into that period of cinema, of Hollywood movies, where it was all CinemaScope, VistaVision, Panavision.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
like 3D movies 10, 15 years ago, had a big push, or IMAX, the IMAX experience now. It's just another way of getting people to come to the cinema. Right?
That
This. I'm not sure what format Bridge on the River Kwai was shot on. Actually, I need to check, but it's all in response to the dawn of television.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
TVs had started coming out in the 50s, and they were like, "Oh my God, people are going to stop going to the movies. We need to do something to make it different." And it's exactly the same argument that's happening now with streaming and with everything else. It's like, what can we do? How can we make this a bit more of a novelty, a bit more of an event, a bit more of an experience? And then the big thing was like, well, let's just blow it up and make it as big as possible. And we're right in the midst of that. So yeah, you've got this. You've got, as you said, Ben-Hur coming up. We've got Lawrence of Arabia coming up, and all of those big films.
The good
So,
ones, the good ones. Gabriel, James, does Bridge over the River Kwai stand the test of time? This is the question we ask at the end of every one of our Every Best Picture series episodes. Does this film deserve its place in Oscar history?
Yes. Yeah, definitely. Do we know it was running against?
30th Academy Awards. It was up against a couple of bangers. It was up against 12 Angry Men, which
Oh wow.
is a obviously a huge movie. The other big one was Witness for the Prosecution, the Billy Wilder movie, which is based, I believe, on a I'm going to get this wrong now. Is it a Hitchcock short story or something like that? No, not Hitchcock.
Mm.
Agatha Christie short story, something like that. But
Ooh.
anyway, it's a big courtroom drama. That's a really big one. And then Sayonara,
Oh,
which
okay.
is Marlon
A
Brando
James
movie, which
Michener, based off a James Michener novel, I think.
is it? Is Sayonara a James
Ah,
Mitchell one? I'm not sure. I mean, it's still around and still relevant. Yes, you're right. No, sorry, you're right. It is from a James Mitchell novel. It's famous now because Miyoshi Umeki won Best Supporting Actress and became the first
yes.
Asian actor
Hmm.
to win an acting Oscar, and that obviously that's a record that stood until Michelle Yeoh. Really, if
Hmm.
you don't count sort of Indian act, if you look like Far East sort of, to use the word Oriental performance, something like that. It's a record that lasted for a very, very long time. But it was, it was the big favorite coming in. It had, I think, the most nominations and was the biggest film at the box office that year in the US and Canada and the UK. So it was a huge hit. But then it was up against, Sidney Lumet's first film, 12 Angry Men, and other things like that. And then it went and won 7 Oscars: Best Picture, Best Director, Best
Ooh.
Actor, Best Adapted Screenplay. Now, I just want to highlight that very quickly because that was interesting. Because this is right during the blacklist. So the two actual writers of the film, Michael Wilson and Carl Foreman, were both on the blacklist. So they were not credited with the screenplay. The author of the novel, Pierre Boulle, was credited with the screenplay at the time and actually won the Oscar, although he didn't even speak English, let alone be able to adapt his own French novel into English. And it was only in the 90s, I think, that the Academy actually sorted it out. It might have been the 80s. It was many years later that they finally rectified that and went, okay, yeah, it actually, the credit goes to these two guys, both of whom were already dead by then. So,
Posthumously.
indeed. So yeah, it was a big, big, big hit and beat out some other good stuff. But yes, Gabe, sorry, you were saying, does it deserve its place in Oscar history?
I mean, yeah. Compared to those two, like I haven't seen either 12 Angry Men or the other one. The Sydney, no, Sidney Lumet was 12 Angry Men. What was the other one?
Witness for the
Sign.
prosecution
Oh,
Yeah, haven't seen either of
and
those, but
Sayonara in Pain, Please.
I still think, yeah, holds up. Deserved every award it got. Like it's a gorgeous movie. Just like watching some of the shots where Nicholson's given his "I'm closer to the end than I am to the beginning" speech over the bridge, and it's like the sunset coming down, stunning. Um, just like the narrative, the characters. It's got like three really strong leads in it, and Saito, Nicholson, and Shears keeps you interested in the entire film.
I don't have much to add to that. I feel exactly the same. I think Library of Congress has made it a culturally significant movie. This is considered one of the great movies. So, I mean, it really when we ask this question with some of the past winners, we're thinking, well, maybe sort of this one goes without saying. It absolutely stands its place. I'm sorry, deserves its place in Oscar history and stands the test of time.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, it's David Lean. Well, we haven't mentioned David Lean, who directed it,
Mhm.
who would go on to direct Lawrence of Arabia in a few years' time. It is epic filmmaking, but it is also an adventure story. It's about something, it raises big questions and then tackles them with fantastic performances. Like we said, Alec Guinness in his Oscar-winning role. Yeah, I think it really does stand the test of time. It's a film that I think we've all noted that we've gone back to, revisited many times, and I will continue to do so. It's a nice little time capsule. And yes, although there are other big films there, I mean, 12 Angry Men and Witness for the Prosecution, particularly, are still very much around and very much available. They're still regarded very, very highly. But I don't think anybody's got a problem with Bridge on the River Kwai beating them to the award. So I think we're all in agreement.
I can't get the song out of my.
Well, when you whistle, your mic doesn't pick it up. It's like when
Oh
you
no!
Yeah,
clap.
I heard him coming through the glass, but not
Oh,
through the phone.
So that I
oh
was just looking at you,
man!
going, "What are you doing?" Because you're like, I was like, "What are you doing?"
He's improving.
Anyhow, that's
Uh,
it's going to wrap up this episode of Every Best Picture. Gabriel, wonderful to have you join us. Look forward to
Glad to
having
be
you
here.
in the future. And obviously, you can look for James and I on Blue Sky or Instagram social media. James?
That's right. Yes. What do you think? I mean, there's so much to talk about with this movie. Does it deserve its place in Oscar history? Would you rate it over 12 Angry Men? Any big Peyton Place fans out there? That held the record for a number of years as being one of the film with the most nominations that didn't win anything. I think it had 9. That was then beaten by The Turning Point and Color Purple. Both got 11. There's one more piece of trivia from this particular Oscars, that the movie that I haven't seen, called Designing Woman, won Best Original Screenplay, and to date remains the only film to win Best Original Screenplay that wasn't nominated for anything else. So,
oh wow, that I did not know. Thanks again, Gabriel. James, have a great evening. Until next episode, everybody. Bye bye.
Bye bye.
You're wonderful to see. You ought to be in pictures. Oh, what a hit you would be.